Hello and welcome to a demonstration of the EOR Training Standards feature. Training standards can be used to ensure that personnel within your organisation hold the required qualifications. You can use the timings shown in each of the section marker slides, such as this one, to skip between the sections. Firstly, we need to save some generic qualification names into EOR so that we can use these qualification names over and over again when we're assigning qualifications to members of our team. Firstly, scroll down to the Settings tab and then click on Qualification Names. You can see that we've already got some qualification names saved into our system, but we'll work through a few additional examples to show you how it's done. We need to click on the plus button located top right, and here we need to add the name of the main qualification. So this is going to be our induction qualification, and we need to state whether we issue those inductions internally, if it's a member of our staff that issues the induction, or do we have an outside trainer come in to issue the induction for us. Our inductions are issued internally, so we'll select that. And now we need to add in the sub-qualifications of the main induction. Think of these as modules. So our main induction is going to have two modules. The first module is going to be the initial induction, and the second module is going to be the refresher induction. We need to come down to the sub-qualification area and click the plus button next to it and then fill in the name. Let's call this one Induction Initial. As you can see, it's issued internally, and the initial induction doesn't ever expire, so the valid for period will be not applicable. Click Done to return to the main qualification, and then we'll add the next module again by clicking the plus button, and let's call this one Induction Refresher. We require our employees to receive an induction on an annual basis, so the refresher period for this will be 1 year. Click on Done to return to the main qualification, and then click on Done again to return to our list of qualification names. You can see that induction has now been added to the list. We're now going to add a couple of additional qualification names, and you can either watch us do this until you get the gist of it, or feel free to skip on to the next section of the video. So again, let's come up to the plus button. Let's add in the name of the main part of the qualification, and let's call this CPCS. CPCS is issued externally, and let's add in the sub-quals or modules, and we'll only add one in here. Let's call it 360 Excavator above 10 tons. And that we will state will be valid for 5 years. Click Done and Done again. Now let's add in the equivalent to that for NPORS. So plus button, main qualification being NPORS, issued externally, and the sub-qualification can be the exact same thing, 360 Excavator above 10 tons. Again, we're going to put it down that it's valid for 5 years. If we wanted to, we could add in more sub-qualifications or modules to NPORS, for example for counterbalance forklift trucks or for NUPs, etc, etc. We will now add a qualification for asbestos. And lastly, a qualification for DSE. You can add in whatever qualification names and sub-qualifications you need, obviously calling them whatever suits the training that you issue to your guys and girls. We will now take a quick look at how we can use the qualification names that we have just created to assign qualifications to people. Let's return to our main menu. Scroll to the Personnel tab and let's take a look at Joe Bloggs. Joe Bloggs has already got a CPCS card assigned to him, but he hasn't yet got a company induction. So let's add that company induction for him by clicking on Add Qualification, click on the qualification title, and now we can search our list of qualification names for induction, and we can select it. And then we can add the sub-qualifications as the initial induction, which was carried out yesterday. And you can see here that it doesn't expire. And then we can add the second sub-qualification as the refresher induction, again issued yesterday, but this time it only lasts for 1 year and will expire in October next year. Now that we've added the standard qualification names that we will need to use over and over again when assigning qualifications to personnel, we want to purify our list of qualifications and make sure that those qualifications that need to be assigned a standard name have been assigned a standard name. So again, we'll come down to our Settings tab and we will click on Qualification Names. We will now click on the Purify Qualifications button. Here, EOR will show us the qualifications and sub-qualifications that are saved in the system but have not yet been assigned a standard qualification name. If we click on this asbestos qualification belonging to John Smith, we can see that it's been given a name of asbestos, but when the person added this into the system, they obviously didn't select the name from our list of standard qualifications. Instead, they manually typed it in. So what we need to do here is click on the title and click on asbestos, and that will ensure that this qualification has now been linked to a qualification name. If we click on the Purify Qualifications button again, we will see that the asbestos record for John Smith that we just updated will disappear from the list because it's now linked to a standard qualification name. We can now work our way through the remaining qualifications in the list, ensuring that they're assigned to a standard qualification. Let's click on the module here for John Smith's asbestos awareness, and if we click on it again, we can assign the asbestos awareness qualification to a standard qualification name. Again, we will click on the Purify Qualifications button to update the list. This then leaves us with Jane Doe's module for dermatitis health surveillance and Jane Doe's HAVS module as requiring updating. You'll notice here that Joe Bloggs has also got a degree for chocolate teapot making. This isn't a qualification that we're going to use on a regular basis, so we don't need a qualification name for it. So instead of linking it to a qualification name, we can simply click on Mark as not applicable. and I will now continue to update Jane Doe's modules. Again, feel free to watch or skip on to the next section of the video. All of the qualifications that we have saved in EOR are now purified and linked to a standard qualification if they need to be, or marked as not applicable. Just to quickly show you one other feature, if we want to see all of our qualifications that are marked as not applicable, we can simply click on this tick here and they will pop up. We can now return to our main menu. Training standards are used to detail the minimum qualifications that a person must hold in order to be deemed as competent to carry out a particular role or task within an organisation. In order to add training standards, we need to scroll down to the Settings tab and then click on Training Standards. We will add a couple of example training standards so that you can see how to use them. Firstly, come up to the plus button. Enter the title for the training standard, and this one here is going to be a training standard for a labourer. The date that we reviewed the training standard, and how often the training standard needs to be reviewed. We can now get to adding qualifications to this standard. We will now add the qualifications that a person must hold to be deemed as competent to be a labourer within our organisation. Click on the plus button next to Add Standard. Now scroll down the list and add the qualifications required. The first qualification that a person must hold is a company induction. We require them to hold both modules of the company induction. So we will click Done, Add Next. And again, Done, Add Next. The labourer will also be required to hold a CPCS card. Firstly, click Done, Add Next to allow us to add the CPCS card. Now scroll down and find the CPCS card. We also want to add 2 modules to this CPCS card as required. So click Done, Add Next. Then we'll add the HSE test module. Done, Add Next. And then we will click the labourer module. We also want to add the fact that the labourer will be required to hold asbestos awareness. So again, Done, Add Next, select asbestos, Done, Add Next, and then asbestos awareness. And that is our training standard complete for a labourer. Each line indicated here shows a qualification that a person must hold to be deemed as competent to be a labourer. So this standard reads as a labourer must hold an induction with 2 modules of an initial induction and a refresher induction. The labourer must hold a CPCS card with 2 modules of HSE test and labourer. And the labourer must hold an asbestos awareness course with a module of asbestos awareness. We will now add a training standard for a 360 excavator operator to show you the OR feature. Click on the plus button to add the standard, enter its title, date reviewed, and how often it requires review. Now we need to add the qualifications that a person must hold in order to be deemed as competent to be a 360 excavator operator. We're not going to add all of the basic qualifications to this, as we covered that in a previous video. Click on the Add Standard button, and the first qualification that a 360 excavator operator must hold is the company induction. He is also required to hold the modules to the induction, so let's add those separately. Done, add next. Initial, done, add next. Refresher. Now we need to add the qualifications that deem the person competent to operate the 360 excavator. So we select Done, Add Next, and let's add the main qualification that the person must hold. A person must hold a CPCS card, or they can hold an NPORS card. Notice how we've marked both as being applicable without clicking Done, Add Next. Now that we have clicked both, click Done, Add Next, and we can now select the modules that a person must hold to be deemed as competent to operate a 360 excavator. So they can hold the CPCS module of 360 excavator above 10 tons, or they can hold the NPORS module of 360 excavator above 10 tons. Again, we've selected both modules at once without clicking Done, Add Next between them. Now we're done adding the qualifications that a person must hold. Let's read what this training standard is saying that a 360 excavator operator must hold. They must hold a company induction, they must hold an initial induction module, and they must hold a refresher induction module. Things change a bit for the bottom two lines. These say that the operator must hold either a CPCS card or an NPORS card, and they must hold modules of either CPCS 360 excavator or NPORS 360 excavator. You can also add training standards for specific pieces of equipment or specific tasks. For example, we could have a training standard for using a disc cutter or a strimmer, or we could have a training standard for entering a confined space. Let's have a quick go at adding a training standard for using a disc cutter. Click the plus button to add the standard, enter its title, the date it was reviewed, and how often it needs review. Now let's get to adding the qualifications that a person must hold to be deemed as competent to operate a disc cutter. Click on Add Standard and work our way down the list, selecting the relevant qualifications. Abrasive wheels, done, add next. Abrasive wheels module, done, add next. Face fit, done, add next. Face fit module, done, add next. And finally, because it's a vibrating tool, they will need health surveillance. So let's select health surveillance, and let's select the health surveillance module of hand-arm vibration. Now let's read what this training standard is saying. In order for a person to be deemed as competent to operate a disc cutter, a person must hold the main abrasive wheels qualification and the abrasive wheels module. They must hold the main face fit with the face fit module. They must hold health surveillance and the health surveillance module for hand-arm vibration. In order to assign a training standard to a job title, we need to scroll down to the Settings tab. We then need to select job titles. In a previous video, we set up a training standard for a 360 excavator operator. So let's select that job title. Now that we're on the job title, we want to add the training standard that applies to it. So click on the plus button next to Edit Standards. You can see here the training standard that we set up earlier for the operator of a 360 excavator. Simply select it and click Done, and that training standard is now linked to the job title. Let's link one more training standard to its job title. If you remember earlier, we set up a training standard for a labourer. So let's select labourer. Click on the plus button and select labourer from the list. If we wanted to, we could add an additional training standard as disc cutter. This would mean that anybody holding the job title of labourer would be required to hold the labourer training standard and the training standard relating to disc cutter. For the time being, we'll deselect disc cutter. Training standards can also be assigned per person. Let's click on the Personnel tab and let's select our labourer. If we scroll up, we can see that Joe Bloggs the labourer is already linked to the labourer job title training standard. If we want to add an additional training standard, we can add his bespoke ones here. Click on Add, and we might want Joe to be competent to use a disc cutter, in which case we can select disc cutter from the list. And now Joe needs to meet the labourer's training standard because that's his job title, but he also needs to meet the training standard to use a disc cutter. Now let's use our training standards to carry out an automatic audit to find out who requires what training. We'll first manually show you what we think the results of the audit might be to help you understand what the automatic audit is doing in the background. So let's open up John Smith, our 360 excavator operator. We can see that John Smith holds an induction qualification with 2 modules logged against it as initial induction and refresher induction. Let's open the 360 excavator training standards to see if we think that John is deemed as competent to carry out that role. Immediately we can see that John does meet the first portion of the training standard, as he holds the company induction and the 2 relating modules. John doesn't, however, meet the fact that he needs a CPCS card or an NPORS card, and he doesn't meet the fact that he needs either of the CPCS or NPORS modules. When carrying out the training standards automatic audit, we wouldn't expect the results to tell us that John requires induction training, because John already holds induction training. We would, however, expect the audit to tell us that John requires either a CPCS card or an NPORS card, and John requires either a CPCS module or an NPORS module. Now let's carry out the automatic training standards audit. Scroll down to the Settings tab, select Training Standards, and then you will see the Audit Training Standards button. If we click on the Audit Training Standards button, it will display to us all of the qualifications that are required within the company. we want to have a look at the qualifications that are required for John Smith, the 360 excavator operator. So let's search for him. As expected, the audit isn't showing that John requires induction training because John already holds induction training. The audit is, however, displaying the fact that John requires CPCS or NPORS training along with CPCS modules or NPORS modules, as expected. We can also search the audit results to display everybody requiring a certain type of qualification. For example, if we type abrasive wheels into the search bar, we can see that Joe Bloggs and Steve Knight require abrasive wheels training. Additionally, we can export the audit results so that we can view them in a spreadsheet and further interrogate them at our leisure. We can do this by clicking on the print button. For more information, visit our website at www.eor.app.